Hello there, and welcome back to the Agostinho Zinga show with me, your host, Agostinho Zinga, and this is episode number 407. That's 407 of the Agostinho Zinga show. How you doing? How you feeling? Great, amazing, good to know. If it's your first time tuning into the show, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, and leave me a comment down below. If you're listening via any of the podcasting platforms out there, which I'm currently feeding my little show on, make sure you leave me a 5-star review, download the show and share it with your friends. And of course, support via Patreon is always more than welcome. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, please wait, and you're going to see an extra bonus episode coming out this week only for my Patreon subscribers. So if you want to get on there, make sure you jump on patreon.com/Agostinho. That's patreon.com/AGOSTINHO to get involved on that side of things. But yeah, apart from that, how you guys been, man? Bit of a long weekend for me personally. I didn't record as many podcasts last week as I wanted to. Various other life things came in between. But I'm back on the wagon now, back doing the thing that I enjoy the most, and back delivering the content in a hyper quick, digestible way as I can via the medium of podcasting. I've enjoyed this journey so far, especially during this lockdown. It's been probably the only thing, apart from the gym, that's allowed me to have some level of sanity. And I'm going to make sure that I maintain it as we continue with the rest of the year. No excuses from my book in that regards. But yeah, man, how's life been going? Decent, same as usual, not really much change. I think for the most of us, we're all trying to just hold on and make our way across the end of the year as smoothly as we can for the most part. So far, I think a lot of us have kind of gotten some level of respite, some level of relief with the news of the vaccine coming out. But I guess for myself and people like myself who are fans of the nightlife, I'm still a little bit dubious as to whether or not this is actually going to mean a reopening of our sector, as in hospitality, as in nightlife. I don't think it's coming back, man, until like 2022, because I haven't seen no news. Like when that vaccine got announced, I kind of assumed there'd be like a flurry of places popping up announcing or confirming their lineups, right? And saying, hey, by the way, we're going to have this is going on, that is going on, this is going on, right? I've not really seen anything. I've seen the kind of regular ones which are kind of backed by big money, right? The sort of like commercial festivals, they've said something, but they can afford to keep on delaying and delaying, more so as you're like kind of more culturally relevant, independent-y looking festivals, right? Or even nightclubs. They can't really afford to put out any half-baked announcements. They have to wait until it's perfectly sure before they can do anything. And I've not really heard anything. I've seen, because I remember watching this podcast called DJs and Beers. It's on YouTube as well. Check it out. It's on Chris Liebling's channel. It's really good. And they were talking about what people within their sort of like bracket of DJs are doing, right? And this is Chris Liebling, Radio Slave, Drum Code, some really stellar DJs who get to talk like every week about, everything concerning dance, music and nightlife culture. And they were saying on their show that a lot of their people, a lot of their friends, or a lot of people in their kind of peer group are now starting to go and do shows in like places where there's no rules in it, like Mexico, Florida, parts of South America like Colombia and other places. Like that seems to be the new place. You remember in the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was going to like Egypt and Tunisia, right? And parts of southern Italy. Now, because obviously those parts are starting to close up, they're basically following the nightlife wherever it leads them, where it's kind of open, where the markets are sort of open more so than they are maybe in the western side of Europe. So that's been the only thing I've heard so far. I don't know, because they even spoke about plague raves. I've not seen much footage of plague raves now, but I'm not sure if that's a consequence of Instagram decision to take away the ability to like go and location. You could do location searching via Instagram stories. I'm not sure if you guys know about that, but there's this feature on Instagram before where, when you search for a location, you'd search for a location like a restaurant or wherever it may be, and then you could obviously see what people have uploaded based on the location that they're at, like a geotagging thing, and you could search by the most popular images and also most recent, so you could get an idea of what people were doing when they were there. It's great to sort of like spy and stalk location from afar. And there's also the feature where you could click on the little picture that comes up, and that would take you to all the stories people are uploading, tagging that place or using that hashtag, wherever it may be. And Instagram have taken that away. I'm not sure when they did it, but from what I've researched online, it appears that it might have something to do with the US elections. They didn't want to be accused of, I don't know, somehow manipulating the results. I don't know what it may be, but something to do with voting and the elections in the US. So Instagram took away that feature. And the idea is that they were going to reinstate it as soon as the elections were over. But I guess the fact that Trump is still deciding not to concede, that might have led to their decision not to kind of turn that feature back on. But I don't know how that could be any way related, right? There's definitely must have been just a decision for Instagram on their side just to be like, hey, we're taking away this feature point blank, which is a shame because that was the way, that was, I think, the main way how most people were basically finding out these playgrounds are happening, because you could in real time check people tagging themselves at a certain location and then see what was going on, even if the DJ didn't upload the images. So that is maybe allowing a lot of DJs to sort of like do play graves without being kind of called out, because there's not really been a surge of that stuff happening. And you'd imagine, especially now with the colder seasons in most of the kind of, you know, Western Europe, and you know, things opening up in other places, that there'd be a lot more footage out there, but it doesn't seem to be that much of it. But again, I'm not thinking that it's not happening, because I'm sure it is. You know, I've always been a firm believer that there are people just living a completely different experience. Just, you know, this whole COVID idea is like, oh, we're going through this together collectively. No, we're not. You just see how some celebrities are moving and how some politicians are moving. You know, they say one thing and they do the other thing. Some people just living completely different. You know, they're just not even trying to abide by the rules. So I'm sure the ones that are really committed to the party lifestyle are like, you know what, I don't care, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to just keep it moving. So I'm sure that must be a situation out there. But again, we don't really see these things in it going forward. But I don't know, man. I was just thinking about today, thinking, when am I really going to see the inside of a nightclub again? Like, on in its truest sense of the word. I know I could probably go to one now and go to some sort of sit down affair where I'm seated in this, you know, sectioned off little cubicle with my table of 6 mates or 6 strangers. I know I could do that, but who wants to go to a nightclub and experience it, you know, in that fashion? I wouldn't want to do that personally. I want to go and experience it the way I experienced it last year, 2019. And if I can't do that until 2022, then so be it. But I don't know. I just assume because of the vaccine, it would be a lot more encouraging news out there. People talking about, you know, things reopening and, you know, lineups being announced and stuff. But it's been nothing. It's been completely dead, like dead. No news whatsoever. So that's very, very concerning for us nightlife aficionados. But again, maybe I shouldn't be surprised, isn't it? This pandemic has not been it's not been a cinch, and it hasn't really, we haven't really done our best. We haven't really put our best foot forward. Like, if there were karmic points allocated to how your country responded to COVID-19, the UK would be very, very low down the totem pole, innit? Like, we don't really deserve to have things reopening. I know it's not how life works, but if in terms of like the effort put in by the population, the plan put in place by the government, right? There hasn't really been, you can't really say with your chest that we deserve anything, right, of any sort of, you know, positivity when it comes to COVID. Maybe apart from if you're living up north, right? Anyone outside of London has been treated, you know, with utter contempt by a government. But for the most part, no one can really say with their chest, hey, we deserve to have this thing open and that thing open. Unless, again, you're a business owner, unless you live outside of London, then you definitely deserve the right to earn a living, right? And to be able to pay your way without asking for government handouts. That's the been an annoying thing about it. Most people that I've heard speak, small business owners, wherever they are, in whatever sector, most of them have said, hey, I'm happy with foregoing the grants. They're like, you know what, miss me with the grants, you keep the grants, just let me open my business at some capacity, right? Whether it's 30%, 20%, whatever, allow me to basically be able to decide my own future. Let my future be in my own hands, as opposed to just leaving up to the gods. And, you know, depending on when your money runs out is when you suddenly go out of business. That isn't any way to sort of reward people who, for the most part, I would say those people are the ones that are really uphold. I don't know how it works out in terms of numbers, but I would assume if you're a small business owner, you're playing a large part in terms of uplifting our economy, right? You take the risk to even start a business, which is already crazy as it is, right? Taking your money, wherever money that it is, family, loans, whatever, to put it on the line to try and make money in order to pay your bills is a really risky occupation, more so than just getting a normal job. So it should be rewarded in some way, shape or form, right? They should be given some sort of incentive to keep that business going, because you're going to need those places when that get back to normal, which it eventually will. But it's been a very, very odd experience that way. But again, I guess it's just with pandemic, it seems like you get to different varying levels of accepting your situation. And I guess maybe I'm approaching the end of it, right? The end of my cycle in terms of like going through times of denial, right? Grief, loss, all this sort of stuff, right? Maybe I'm heading towards the last few stages, because I think the nightclub thing was one that keep us like, hold on, we just announced a vaccine, right? The first like vaccine approved in Western Europe. You know, I know Russia announced something, but you know, we don't really know what they're really saying about that one that they announced. But the first vaccine approved in Western Europe, everyone's got really good things to say about it. Every expert that I've kind of looked at in terms of what they've been saying has been like encouraging, but there's been no real pickup in terms of like, okay, cool, this venue announced this date, this lineup is announced there, this thing's going on here, this is moving over there. Like, nothing. It's been completely quiet, which leads me to believe that, you know, it might be another year until we get that stuff back. And then again, that guy from Vulture, man, you remember that guy from back in the day in Vulture? I keep mentioning his flipping article all the time because I'm an absolute loser. But let me get up on here again. There was a guy on Vulture who said ages ago, this must have been, I'm gonna say June, July. He must have said this, right? He was saying, "Oh, don't expect any live events, right, to happen in any meaningful way until what was it? Did he say next year? No, until 2022." He said, absolutely mad lad, and he's been proved right for the most part. If you think about how things are panning out, even with a vaccine in mind, it still haven't had any real encouraging news. So let me see where it was. I got it here. I just recently shared it with that Michele guy who I was commenting on something about. Where is it? Too many here at the same time. Come on, load. There we go. Found it. So this is a tweet. Let me quickly read this out, and then we can move on to some actual real topics. Or everything's real here, but you know, just continue on with some other topics. So this was where was this? This was in Variety magazine. This was published in July 17th, right, or 2020. And this guy called Mark Geiger, who is the top touring executive, said, don't expect any concerts to be back by 2022. And unfortunately, it looks like he might be right. So this was an article here from Vulture. It says, Mark Geiger, let me get the image up here before it, let me load because it's getting a bit slow because I've probably got too many windows open at the moment. So please bear with me. But is it going to open? 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 Okay, let's just go. So Mark Geiger, until recently head of music at WME, one of the founders of Lollapalooza, sounds like he's not expecting to be attending any festivals in 2021. Asked by Bob Leffat's podcast when he expects concerts to return, Geiger said, "My guess is late 21 or more likely 2022. He told Leffat's that the problem of insurance going forward is a biggie. When it comes to reasons for it, a long delay, although there are probably 20. He said, "Look, the whole thing is a shit show. Whether it's testing or it's the government, it's too infinite of a world to go down. But in my humble opinion, it's going to be 2022. It's going to take a long time before what I call the germophobia economy to be slowly killed off and be replaced by what I call the claustrophobia economy, which is where everybody wants to go out and go back to dinner and have their life and go to festivals and go to shows. And my instinct is that this is going to take a while because, as you can see, there are super spreader events, sports, shows, festivals, anything, the classroom, anything going to do well while the virus is going is its presence." So is this person. Yeah, cool. So my instinct is the world has a very long forced time out, Geiger said. A lot of people see this as positives in this, whether it's climate, whether it's pollution, whether it's traffic, and whether it's nature, whether it's animals, whether it's our own beings, and taking a pause. And I know it's frustrating, maddening, and economically destructive, but this is bigger than us. And if you study history, things like this have happened in history and have been super disruptive to normal society. So here's a biggie for our lifetime. Jesus Christ. And he continues here, when Leffat's the industry blogger and podcaster brought up the question of insurance, Geiger indicated having policies available for the future is a long way off for most promoters. He said, "There is no insurance against COVID currently offered, and even normal insurance policies are pretty scarce and hard to come by. The insurers are sitting on their sidelines because there's infinite liability. Hey, I got COVID, this and that, how do you prove it, etc. I think the biggest companies can make self-insure, can maybe self-insure and they can start. Everyone else has to wait until the insurance industry feels good. So that's one of many roadblocks in the way of restarting this vibrant economy that got shut down. So there's probably 20 reasons. Insurance is the biggie, and I don't know where that comes back either. So I guess he was right in the end, didn't it? He was basically proved right. And I think at the time I was thinking, this is, I think I even mentioned when I tweeted back to him that, I mean, Kylie guy, that I was under the assumption, best possible scenario was that would be back to normal. And when I mean normal, I mean whatever you were doing this time last year, I'd say the earliest summer of next year, right? Summer 22, I thought, okay, stuff will start to feel normal by then. But considering how shit the response has been to COVID in general in the UK and parts of Europe, and considering that the response to the vaccine has been great, but also not as encouraging as I'd hope, because I'd imagine, you don't have to vaccinate the people who are at risk, but then that still require people to still abide by some of the, distancing and all those rules in the meantime, to spread to stop the spread of the virus in the meantime. All these little things are in the way. And then of course the things in place just in general that I'm not even aware of, right? In terms of actually operating a venue, operating an event, that are going to be affected by this complete, pause in life moving around for a best part of 2 years. It's definitely going to have some after effects. It's not like you can just turn it back on. And it definitely does go back to my rubbish analogy that I made ages ago about it feeling like a house party where the police come and close the event, or the police come and tell you to lower the music, and then you lower the police tell you to finish the house party, and you lower the music, hope the police go away and don't come back. You turn it back on again, but the party is never the same, right? Because the police just coming it's affected something. It's kind of left a bit of an after effect, and no matter how much you try and get it going again, you try and get people started, you get a DJ on the decks, it never really goes back to how it was prior. And I always imagined the lockdown would be the same for the entertainment industry. It would be a necessary moment for some government, especially in the UK with the Tory government. It feels like, they're opposed to any kind of fun activities that don't include shopping, right? But they would use this as a good opportunity to maybe, bleed that industry dry, or not industry dry, basically what's it called, they call it when you add to sort of flush them out, right? That's what it feels like they're trying to do at the moment. They don't like a certain segment of our nighttime economy because they don't mind restaurants and shopping and stuff, but when it comes to nightclubs and bars, the Tory government seems to have a bit of a bug to bear with that industry. I'm not too sure what it's about, but regardless, this would be a perfect opportunity, again, if you were acting in their interest, to be like, hey, let's squeeze these guys a little bit, let's leave them out in the lurch for a prolonged period of time without giving them any possibility to reopen under any sort of safe COVID secure way, and let's just let nature happen and run its course. And then by just removal of time, people are definitely going to fall by the wayside. And you've definitely seen it. You see many places decide to just not open at all because there's no point, and just completely cease to exist. So you can just imagine what another year is going to do, let alone another 6 months. So it's not looking good. But again, what can you do, man? I guess the writing should have been on the wall a long time ago for most of us, but it is what it is. It is what it is. Anyway, let's move on. What else did I want to talk about? Oh, okay. The most important news. Let's go in this one. This one's been a bit of an annoying situation to deal with as a Man United fan. As most of you guys are aware, we have Paul Pogba playing for us, right? A very talented, supremely gifted footballer. Obviously a French World Cup winner. Numerous titles and European Cups and medals and stuff. Won at Juventus, and of course Europa League medal. Of course, his time at United as well, and somebody who kind of has, I guess, for the most part, flattered to deceive at United, right? He's never really kind of reached the heights that we've all kind of hoped, and he probably, for the most part, isn't really the player everyone probably thought in their heads when he finally did come at United. I think we all kind of assumed he was Yaya Toure incarnated, Steven Gerrard-esque in his ability to drag a team from the bottom way to the top, and he just isn't that guy in it. For better or worse, he's not that guy. So he's had a bit of a tumultuous time at United, and it feels like it's all coming to a head now because recently Mino Raiola, his illustrious super agent, who is somewhat effectively referred to as a bit of a leech and a bit of a virus, and someone that Alex Ferguson didn't really have a lot of time for, but an agent who seems to be really popular with a lot of high caliber young players, because for as much as he annoys the fan base, myself included, with these ill-timed comments, because I don't think that the comments definitely don't come out of nowhere. I think for sure he is, echoing the thoughts of his clients, but of his whatever it is. But for the most part, you can definitely see if you're a young player and you want to have somebody fighting your corner, wanting to get as many coins as they can out of the club you're signing for, making sure that the terms in your contract are beneficial, making sure that the structure in place is going to make, allow you to have the best platform for you to showcase your skills. Mino Raiola is a guy for you. But if you're the actual club who's having to deal with him, I can understand why you'd hate his guts, because he always seems to have an ability to wrangle the fan base with these really snappy comments just when the club are facing a really crunch game or a period in their history where they're sort of maybe suffering in a bit of bad form. And usually he leaves these comments for the international break. That's when Mino Raiola tends to do most of his damage. Or even Paul Pogba, he'll go away for France and you'll start talking with his own media channels there in his native language, feeling comfortable, and you would literally just open up about his experience. And some of it's honest, but if you're a Man United fan, I can understand why some segments of United fans base would not be happy to hear a player that plays for your club basically saying anything negative about the club. It's just not acceptable, and we just don't accept it. Even though we know they're humans and they're players and they probably don't love the club as much as us, we just can't accept when it does happen. So when Mino Raiola comes out and says the following stuff, as he said just now, I get up here on the screen, he said the first thing they kind of popped up with was this comment here: I can say that it's over for Paul Pogba at MUFC. And this is a critique regarding a comment via Tutto Sport that Fabrizio Romano basically espouses on. And this comes off the back of him performing, pretty well in the second half against West Ham and scoring an absolute worldie of a goal from about 30 yards out, side foot, into the side netting, bending it outside the post, inside. It's just a fantastic goal. And he essentially, kicked us on to eventually turn that game around 3-1 with obviously the help of Bruno Fernandes. So for some United fans, it's just a final straw, right? That Bert the Camel's back. He's kind of done this quite often. His agent has come out and said very disparaging stuff about the club, some of which the fan base has agreed with, but again, you just don't want to hear it from your players' agents. Just don't. Just say what it is. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with the way that Pogba just does stuff. I don't think he's disrespectful. I think, if anything, considering the level of players he's played with over the years, considering the level of managers he's had, the lack of structure in our club overall, us basically not achieving the success that we did under Sir Alex Ferguson in any meaningful way since his retirement, and just the general craziness and circus that surrounds Man United, he's done pretty well, all things considered. We haven't really had any account of him doing a Granit Xhaka and, throwing his armband on the floor or stropping on the pitch and stuff. For the most part, if he plays poorly, he plays poorly. But I'd never really seen anything that would lead me to believe that he has an attitude problem. If anything, he has the poor timing of just not knowing when to shut up and let his performances do the job, and when to maybe speak in a very clear and direct way to get his message across and not bring it up again. Because I think if you would just left it at the comment that he did when he was with, I think, in China doing Adidas commercial or something, and he said the first thing clearly, hey, I want to move, I want to change, or maybe a new challenge, and just left it at that, I think that would have been perfectly fine. Every fan was obviously still upset about it, but if a player wants to leave United, they want to leave United. It's no big deal. You don't hold players against their will. You let him go and you start making plans to replace him with other players that maybe fit what we're trying to do for the future. No harm done. But I think it's a constant speaking out to the press via his agent, and then of course the occasional comments Pogba makes when he goes to international break that have just added to all this hate that he's been getting on social. It's been really interesting to see the amount of vitriol that comes the way of Paul Pogba from, it feels like, the majority of the fan base. Whenever I've said anything defending him, especially even on forums, I get absolutely destroyed, right? People just don't want to hear it. So there's one narrative about Paul Pogba that everyone seems to agree with, but then when it comes to the ownership, when it comes to the manager, when it comes to our lack of sporting director of football, there's no unity. We don't have the same amount of vitriol and venom towards our owners, who are basically bled us dry, withdrawing dividends from the club, not allowing our managers to spend in a very strategic and way that would kind of point towards us trying to become the best club in the world again. The hiring of us, I guess, pretty subpar managers, or managers that don't really have any relation to each other, right? We had a catalogue of managers post Alex Ferguson, none of which have any they don't have any similarities in their style of play and the profile of play that they want. So there's obviously no direction in terms of where we're trying to go as a club. Our failure to appoint a director, football and sporting director, to kind of map out what that kind of track record is going to be, or what that journey is going to look like. But we don't seem to have that same amount of vitriol, and I wonder what it is. Is it because the system of the club is just too big to kind of feel like you can make an impact on? And it's easy to maybe point the finger at managers and players, right? Because they're individuals in that regard. Or is it just because Paul Pogba seems to just get under the bonnet of much more people that support United or attached to United than any other person at the club does? Which is really bizarre, considering that he's our, on paper, one of our, if not the most talented player we have at the club, right? You look at people like a Phil Jones, for instance, who've recently signed a new contract. He's supposedly back from injury, hasn't got sniffed the whole season, is happy to collect his wages and not really kick up much of a fuss, and no one's really making any noise about him basically collecting his wages and not doing anything, right? Not playing football, right? And not actually performing to a level that he's meant to be performing at. But maybe it's mostly because of what he doesn't do. He doesn't come out and make noise in the press. He's not trying to angle for a move ahead of a big game, which would probably want to matter if it was Phil Jones, because no one really cared because he wasn't going to play anyway. But I don't know, maybe it's just the way he does stuff if you're Paul Pogba. Because if I was because I just look at it from my point of view, being a fan of the guy and being a fan of the club, and just knowing that we've never really had a player of his level post Fergie for a while. Everyone's kind of been pretty substandard. And again, we're not like Liverpool. We don't have a stellar manager which you can basically trust to, like, okay, let him, let Coutinho go, and Klopp is good enough to basically turn Oxlade-Chamberlain into Coutinho if he stays fit, right? He's a good enough coach to basically get the best out of proper, not average, but I say less talented players than a player like him. But we don't have that sort of manager at our club. We have a manager who quite clearly, even though I'm not Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's, biggest fan, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer quite clearly needs players to be a success at United. He needs signings, right? If he has signings, he's shown us so far that he can get the best out of them. Like it or not, his signings track record so far has been pretty decent. Whether or not he has the final say so, whatever it may be, I don't care. But under his stewardship, the transfers have been fairly solid. They've been performing to the level that need, maybe to exception of only Daniel James, who again that can't really be blamed on Ole that regard, because he was never really that great to begin with. But still, he's shown that if he gets the players he needs, he can perform well. Fair enough, but it doesn't look like he's going to get that transfer budget at United, right? We needed about 5 to 6 players in the summer. We didn't get those 5 to 6 players. We got players that he probably didn't need at the time. So I'm not really sure why people are so confident and so okay with Pogba leaving when we have a board that are unwilling to give managers the funds to strengthen a team when we're in the Champions League, because they just ride off the back of that money. And then we have a manager who doesn't necessarily know how to get the best out of players that are maybe a less of ability than a Paul Pogba. Because Paul Pogba, when he was playing with Andres Pereira and stuff, like, you couldn't get a song on the dance out of those guys. It was very inconsistent. So I don't know, man. I don't know. But anyway, it continues. The comments got even worse, I guess. So this says here, another quote said, Manchester United Paul Pogba never found an agreement on a long-term contract extension after his current contract was extended by a year to 2022 due to a clause triggered by Manchester United, of course. So we maybe we sort of backed ourselves into a corner a little bit, right? We didn't obviously want to let him go in the pandemic year for cheap, but then we also couldn't command the valuation that we basically wanted for him either, because in the pandemic year, right? So clubs that would be able to sign him can't, because they don't have the funds, because they haven't got the gates and the money coming in. So that was obviously a big reason behind him still being at United in the first place. So if anything, he's kind of unlucky in that regard, Paul Pogba. He's a bit unlucky. Like if this was any other time, he probably would have got his chance to go to another club and kick on, because he basically needs this move probably more than we do too. Paul Pogba is 27 years old and he still divides opinion, right? Regardless if I think he's a good player or not, the fan base are split. They don't really convince his level of performance. And then you see players like a Jack Grealish, for instance, playing for Aston Villa and essentially dragging them, kicking and screaming over the finishing line, right? Making sure they survive in the Premier League. And then of course, kicking on this year, you have players like Bruno Fernandes, of course, coming in from United and putting up stupid numbers. Even if he is stat padding to some extent, the numbers he's putting up are just insane in terms of his goal contributions and just his impact into the team overall, and just the vibe that he kind of exudes. It's just all encompassing. But I've long believed, and I think it's been proven here, that they don't actually even get on. I don't think so. Paul Pogba and Bruno Fernandes, they get on to a certain extent, but I definitely think if you're Paul Pogba, there's going to be a hint of jealousy about the way Bruno has been embraced by the fan base and also accommodated by the club, because Bruno Fernandes has got freedom of expression at a level that Pogba never got at United, especially playing with better players. Bruno is essentially allowed to do whatever he wants on the pitch. He essentially got a free role. He presses at the front, really, really well, but for the most part, he doesn't have to track back as bad. He doesn't have to track back as deeply as Paul Pogba does, and he's essentially allowed to basically play sometimes even further forward, average position than Martial. So I can understand why that is, and I think it's been proven here with a couple of the quotes if it continue going up. Mino Raiola said, Paul Pogba is unhappy. He's no longer able to express himself as he would like and as expected of him, which is understandable, again, considering he's mostly playing in a deep lining double pivot position, which has never been his best position. Some would argue, what is his best position? I still think his best position is playing further up the pitch in a number 8 or a number 10 position. He's basically shown that. His numbers have proved that. But if you've got Bruno Fernandes playing there, it's very hard to accommodate two of those types of players, especially underneath Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who probably doesn't have the best range of formation and tactics to accommodate those kind of plays. He has a couple of systems that he chooses to play, right? The 5 at the back, the diamond, sometimes obviously the free, the two double pivots, the number 10 and the 4 and the free forward to obviously come and tuck in if need be into the midfield. But he doesn't have the tactical variety to allow him to be able to play, let's say, 4 center midfielders in the entire midfield. He can't necessarily do that. He needs to have some specialists able to do that kind of job. So that's why it probably doesn't work in that regard. He says, it continues. Mino says Pogba has a contract with Manchester United that will expire in a year and a half and in the summer 2022, but I think his best solution for the parties to sell him in the next market. So of course they're pushing with this, in the January transfer window, which makes complete sense. He said Man United have long wanted to get rid of Paul Pogba, so the feeling is mutual. That I'm really not too sure about, because I think if they did want to sell him, they could have. I think if anything, the club have essentially backed themselves into a corner, because we were kind of routinely sort of mocked in the press about how poorly we dealt with transfers and selling of players and buying of players. The club have sort of made it their mission, it feels like, to not get taken for mugs in terms of selling players again. If it's in their control, they're going to make sure they get the best value. So basically the people who are in charge, Ed Woodward and co, don't look like Muppets. So essentially players like Pogba are suffering because of our inability to buy and sell properly, because now we're sort of like holding on to the idea that we're going to get $100 million dollars for him, which probably £100 million for him, which probably we're not ever going to get, I don't think. It continues here. Fabrizio Romano said Pogba can't stay long at Man United, in my opinion, after Marino's sentences. I expect him to try and sell Pogba in January, which I just definitely expect him to. Again, I don't mind Pogba if he leaves, because I think the patience has worn thin with the club base. I just don't understand the revisionism, right? People just pretending that he's not a good player. People are pretending like he's over it, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of the stick that Zlatan Ibrahimovic got from a lot of English Premier League fans, right? Because he didn't necessarily play in front of your eyes week in, week out. They just assumed he wasn't that good. And in the moment he, took the piss out of England playing for Sweden, and of course came to United, over the age of 33, with a really long injury record, and still put up some crazy numbers, it kind of definitely reminded them, okay, fair enough, he's definitely as good as they say he is. And I think the same should be said for Paul Pogba, because he hasn't necessarily played to a level he maybe shown. Man, he did get the numbers. I think that he got the better numbers at United than he has at Juve. Again, I just don't know what it is. I just don't think some players just will never get the respect they deserve, in certain clubs, at certain leagues. It is what it is. It continues here. It says, from February to April, Paul Pogba was trying to change his mind about Manchester United and be happy at the club, but then something was destroyed. Pogba will not accept any offer from United to extend his contract by 4 to 5 years. And this is probably the most crucial bit. And I think this is definitely an indication of the split in the camp when it comes to the treatment of Bruno Fernandes, because Paul Pogba is very popular in the dressing room. Bruno Fernandes is probably dressing room too. So they're both competing for that kind of alpha captain sort of role, right, in the team. And if anything, in the ideal world, Pogba would be our captain at United, right? He'd be the captain of the club. He's the marquee player. He's the one with the most followers, all that sort of bullshit stuff, right? He's got the, maybe the most accolades and trophies. And if he's belt, he would be the captain of United. But due to, some extenuating circumstances and, some tips with former managers and comments said by the agent himself, he's not the captain anymore. And it's quite clear that Bruno Fernandes feels like he should be the captain too, because he's definitely one of our better players. Even maybe ahead of somebody like a Harry Maguire, who probably is only given the captain armband because he's a big English centre back, right? And we kind of maybe pinning our hopes that he can be our version of John Terry or something, right? But he has no business being Man United's, captain, especially after his first season at the club. It's just insane. So I can imagine there's dumb friction in that dressing room with those three sort of egos, right? And then you add to it that Bruno Fernandes has been given way more freedom than Pogba has ever been given at United, right? He's been accommodated a lot more. We essentially play two centre backs. We essentially play two defensive midfielders. Number one, to protect a centre back we spent 90 million close to on, who can't defend as well as we thought he could. So we need an extra centre DM to play there, and also to protect ourselves because we've got a very attacking front 5 or 6 players playing there. So he's been accommodated in a way that Pogba was never accommodated. Pogba was basically required to defend the ball in his own box, pick it up, spray it out wide, collect it, clip the ball into the box and head it to finish, right? He's expected to do way, way too much, more so than is expected of other players. And this is, again, prior to him playing. He was playing with far less talented players than what Bruno is playing with now at the moment. So I can only imagine what would happen if we get more players, right? We should be a stronger team, and that's what a good team would do. A good team would hold on to their best players and just add to them, right? Convince them of their vision, whatever it may be. But I guess, if we're trying to penny pinch, if we're all chips in on Bruno Fernandes, and again, I'm not really sure that's the right way to go about things, because it looks like we're overly reliant on him. The moment you shut him down, you shut down the entire team. But if that's the case, then Pogba has to go. I don't really see how it's tenable that he comes back from this, especially just before a big Champions League game against Red Bull Leipzig, where there is a scenario that we could get knocked out of Champions League, and then we're facing Man City later on in a week, and then we could get further knocked back again then in the league, and we've had a complete disaster of a week just off the back of 3 league victories in a row or something. So there are fine margins in football, and I guess unfortunately for Paul Pogba, this is one margin he's definitely not going to be able to overcome. But what can you do? Moving on from that one. Moving on, moving deep, moving on, moving deep. I don't know if it's a symptom of us living in a world where no one really wants to get cancelled anymore, right? Everyone's kind of afraid of being the next person that gets kind of called out. Whether or not it's a symptom of the success of the age that we're living in now, where essentially as long as you've got 1,000 true fans, you can maintain a career, keep a roof over your head. So there's not really a need to be divisive or court controversy in order to get more attention on you, because as long as you've got your 1,000 true fans, you can keep it moving. Or just because there's less interesting people around. I don't know what it is, but regardless, I look at the way these guys are talking on this show and how they're interacting with work that's being produced by their contemporaries, and think about if this could ever happen with anybody else that you follow. So this is George Michael and Morrissey talking about this. So let's play a bit of the clip now. Hopefully I don't get pulled.
I found it really quite impossible to care. I think that there's probably several reasons why stuff like this got lost.
Why so? Because you're not interested in that era?
I don't know. Well, I'm not.
Those particular records?
I'm not really, but I wasn't completely controlled by that. I did listen to the records, and I found it very difficult. But I think the artwork was quite good, because it wasn't foul, modern, kind of outrageous pantomime stuff. It was very, very complimentary, I think, to the artist, which I think is quite rare. But ultimately, I don't really care.
Do you listen to any old stuff at all? Apart from early Sandy Shaw, presumably.
That's Morrissey talking.
No. Yes, I do. Yeah, I'm really locked in the very early 60s, but I can appreciate lots of stuff from the 1950s, but...
Like what?
Well, I don't know. Billy Fury? Almost. But not the Clovers.
Just imagine anyone nowadays saying something like that openly on a, at the time, hit TV show or hit TV channel at the time, right? This is BBC, back in the 80s? Yeah, I'm sure cable wasn't around during that time, so most people had only 3 to 4 terrestrial channels that you were watching daily. So everyone was locked in watching these sort of shows. It's like back in the day with Top of the Pops, right? That was a very popular chart show music program sort of thing, right? And everyone watched that because there was nothing else on TV to watch on a Saturday evening. If you wanted to see your favorite band or act performing live, that was basically the place to be. And you talk about, what you saw over the weekend with your friends in school on a Monday. But just imagine being at the level of Morrissey was with the Smiths and saying what he's saying now about a fellow artist, or especially artists of certain minority group. It just wouldn't be on. So let's see what George Michael says.
Any other band?
Let's hear George Michael. I'll forward it to the George Michael bit here. Let's see. Where is he? There you go.
Wrong. I might be wrong.
And George Michael as well. I get the hype. Like, he was a beautiful man back in the day. You can understand why, there was a frenzy around George Michael back then. And I'm not even sure if he came out during that time. Was it later on when he said that song, "Let's Go Outside"? Was it then? Take me back to the place that I lost, wherever that song was, right? That might have been the era when he fully came out. I don't think he was out at that time back in those days. So there was maybe the illusion that he was straight. So you can just imagine, right? The people on the underground who knew him from the gay scene were like, "No, we know he's gay and he's our guy." And then the girls were just clamoring for him. Like, he was a very, very good looking guy. He still, don't get me wrong, he still scrubs up pretty well now. But back then, like, he looks like an absolute doll.
The book just became incredibly suspect for me the minute I saw...
you do like them? I mean,
I do like them, yeah. It became very suspect when I saw that it was partially... a lot of the contributions were from a gentleman called Paul Morley. And
you don't approve of Mr. Morley?
You'd need a book a lot thicker than that just to list that man's ideas or hang-ups, whatever you like to call it. But it became very, very pretentious in so many areas that I actually didn't finish it. I didn't get anywhere near finishing it. And I actually really liked Joy Division, or particularly their second album.
What? Closer?
Closer. I thought Closer, the second side of Closer, is one of my favourite albums. It's just beautiful. I mean, like, musically...
24 Hours, sounds like...
I can't remember. There was The Eternal and... 24 Hours. There's just 4 tracks, which I don't even know the listing of, but they're just beautiful musically. I didn't actually see it. I thought their image, all the way through liking them, I thought their image was pretentious and contrived, and it did have very fascist elements to it. But I thought the music was great. And
imagine, I don't know, just a kind of thought. Just imagine anyone that I kind of like nowadays saying something like this. Maybe apart from maybe, I don't know, the guys from Interpol or something. I can't think of anyone that would come out and actually say this about their peers nowadays. Everyone's just so boring and vanilla. I don't know what it is about this current era. I don't know. Maybe it's just a consequence of the times we're living in, isn't it? Not much hardship. Maybe that's why everyone was so kind of positive about the creative output post-COVID, because this would be the first sort of like actual bit of hardship and collective misery that people would be going through in the West if you're kind of from the creative industry. You haven't really gone through anything for real, right? Maybe some economic downturn if you're from places like Spain and France and Greece and stuff. You've had to kind of migrate and go somewhere else or to kind of seek your fortunes in pastures anew. But for the most part, if you're from a fairly well-to-do family, pretty stable, you've gone through all the levels of education, you decide to go to art college somewhere, you've not really had anything, you've not really had a struggle, a hurdle to kind of overcome of any meaningful fashion that would really impact your ability to kind of make success of yourself. Yes, family members pass away, stuff happens in life, but for the most part, no real struggle in it, especially societal, yeah? Especially if you have like fringe lifestyle choices. Like this is the best era to live, really, isn't it? Everyone's more accepting than they were maybe 30, 50 years ago. So you can just imagine how hard it is, number one, to be those guys the way they are back then, right, in a society that doesn't really understand what they're about. Then obviously you're pursuing a career like music at a time when maybe it's probably way more difficult to do than it is maybe now. The entry level is super low. And then just, in general, over the years, like maintaining that level of success, decade after decade after decade is just absolutely batshit insane. Think about it. Especially again, considering how people are so flash in the pan nowadays. Hot one moment, gone cold the next moment. And these guys were doing it decade after decade after decade, whilst being so outspoken, whilst saying stuff that could potentially get you cancelled if you're anybody else. Absolutely wild, man. Wild stuff to see. But again, check that out. I'll link it to show notes with a full little interview clip, but it's pretty cool. Next on the list, we have a pretty sad. You call it sad? A pretty good reminder as to, like, you know, it's weird, isn't it, right? Because I think I mentioned it previously before. There's always this common thing you keep getting told, right? I keep getting told. People keep telling me this thing all the time. Whenever you speak about, events and stuff reopening, we can't copy what a next country did, right? We can't do this, what they do. We can't do what they do because their country's different, society's different, weather's different, different people. There's all these excuses everyone makes about not being able to copy the procedures and actions of another country that have effectively dealt with COVID a lot better than we have in the UK. And I never understand why, especially when you say to yourself, hey, if we're all meant to be first world countries, right, of, you know, whatever it may be, right, developed countries, countries where everyone wants to send their kids to college or schools and stuff, right? Countries where we are welcoming to immigrants because, you know, you accept that you have the land of milk and honey and you need these people to come in and maybe, you know, prop up your economy, allow you to open up different sectors, blah, 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 blah. If that's the case, why can't we just copy other places that are doing well? It just doesn't make any sense. And one of these examples is from Australia. This guy called Champ Chong posted this video of what appears to be a concert, a festival, whatever, at night in Australia, taking place in December of this year. So sometime within the last week or so, they were having a festival in Australia during the pandemic. Absolutely maddening, bro. It's maddening for myself because, again, I want to get back to going outdoors and attending events and all this sort of stuff, and it seems like there's absolutely no light at the end of the tunnel for us in the UK, even with the vaccine in place. I said at the beginning of the show, I thought the vaccine was going to be the start for the primer for loads of good news from loads of events places, right? And there's been no real change with the response and the attitude towards COVID. It's been the same. Everyone's just kind of, okay, we got a vaccine, that's great, but we're just continuing on. So it makes me believe that maybe the vaccine isn't the answer to all our troubles. So this is someone's tweet here. Champ Chong says the following: this is happening in my city here in Australia right now in December 2020. Post-COVID festivals are here. We haven't had a case of COVID in the country for over 8 months. One new case. Life is back to normal thanks to everyone doing the right thing. Collective responsibility. So I'll play a little bit of it here. Hopefully it's not too loud. Look at that. It's an actual festival with people with phones out and stuff, girls on top of guys' shoulders, loud music. So don't be surprised if you see loads of your favorite DJs deciding to go on tour somewhere outside of, somewhere near Australia, because it looks like everyone. Okay, there's a comment on here is really good as well. He says, by the way, I'm not bragging, just very proud of everyone here for doing this thing. Now we get to live normally again. He says, I might film a mini documentary for my YouTube show, you guys around Perth, Australia, and show why our method worked. I've contacted some local state officials, business owners and artists and regular Aussies who've been impacted the city without COVID. He says, for those wondering how we did it, someone asked the question, right? How did you guys do it, right? Because that's what I would want to know. Someone says a question, out of curiosity, what did your country do differently? And Chum Chong said the following: my state of Western Australia has been extremely strict since the very start. We closed our border to the country and the world. If you want to enter, you have to be a resident or have very specific work. Then complete a 2-week mandatory hotel quarantine before entering the public. Already there's loads of red flags in terms of how we would go about doing it. And part of me thinks maybe not forcing is a good way, but I get the thing about, hey, every country is different, right? The population, the populace, the citizens of the country, and just how they conduct themselves, right? And what they expect from the government and what they will and will not accept in terms of orders and direction. But a part of me thinks like if this is for the greater good, and if there's money on the line, which there is, right? The economy is suffering, unemployment is at a record high, and all this other sort of stuff outside of the economy in terms of people's mental health is also being affected, right? So it's definitely going to leave some deep scars and pain points for people, even, once this thing is over. You would assume with all that stuff riding on it that you do whatever it could to ensure that you can bounce back as quickly as possible. That's what I'd assume. So even if that meant sometimes, I wouldn't say forgoing people's civil liberties, but whatever force would need to be applied to put those rules in place, right? Even if it meant you get hated on in the beginning and then you basically get proven right later on, they'd be beneficial, wouldn't they? You wouldn't just be, because I felt like we've been babied a bit here in the UK. We've been kind of told one thing, then the thing changes, then we get kind of sold a fake dream, then it changes again. Like we've just been babied throughout. No one's really given us maybe the cold hard truth stuff came towards the end of the year when they started to get serious with these kind of regional lockdowns, right? It kind of felt like, okay, cool. There's, especially with the recent lockdown we had as well, it felt like there was a different tone to the conversations that were being had and how basically things were being said in the press conferences from Boris and other people. But for most of the year, it felt like we were just being babied throughout it. You've already been told the extent of the issue at hand, a real, black and white forecast as to how bad things could get if we don't change things in the future, if we don't affect some kind of change, we don't make the necessary changes in order to again change again in order to make sure we have a better future. But I don't know, man. I think they could have been more done. There could have been definitely a little bit more of a stern fist come down in order to kind of get us all in line. But again, he continues here, says Australia, the following: everyone worked from home and we had travel zone checkpoints within the city limits at the start. Everyone followed the new laws because we figured a short-term sacrifice made sense. There have been no COVID cases in the community here since April. So it definitely helps that everyone sort of like sims from the same hymn sheet, right? You kind of need that. And maybe the fact that we have so many dissenting voices, I guess, with the fact that they did such a poor job with the first couple of lockdowns here in the UK. Sometimes, which is why I'm not that annoyed with people who are skeptical about the response and about lockdowns in general and just have misgivings about what we're doing, because it's been dealt with so poorly, right, in the beginning, that it's hard to trust people now when they say, okay, now we've got a handle and now we've fixed the issue. It's very difficult to believe that person and kind of put your faith in what they're doing and follow the rules as they need to be followed. So without that collective ownership, without that collective responsibility, it's really impossible to sort of handle a pandemic of this scale. It just isn't going to work. And maybe again, Australia is easier to deal with because they're an island, all this stuff. I get it, blah blah blah. But still, people travel interstate, right? Interstate, whatever that term is. So there's still the possibility of people spreading it countrywide, right? There's still have people within the country that could just say, hey, we don't want to follow the rules. But the fact that most people did, and they've sort of limited the cases and not had any cases in the last 8 months, is absolutely insane. Of course, most of that's probably been helped with the fact that they haven't opened up their borders internationally for a while. That kind of limits, the amount of people coming in. No, not many English, I guess, international tourists. Not many tourists coming over from Southeast Asia too, who probably frequent parts of Australia for holidays during this year, especially with Chinese New Year coming, next year as well. I'm assuming there's probably a big population of Chinese people there too. All of that you're kind of preventing, which definitely helps, isn't it? Because most of the Southeast Asian countries too have kind of inoculated or sealed themselves off from other Southeast Asian countries as well. It's no coincidence that places like South Korea, Vietnam, all these places have got really good numbers in terms of cases and how they kept them relatively low over the last few months, especially when you consider their population and population density. But yeah, man, I don't know, it's just annoying to think about it in general going forward, all these flipping lockdowns and regional bullshit that happen all the time. But hey, what can you do? Then I stumbled across this really funny video on Twitter again, which has been my safe haven for the last month or so, of Fran Lebowitz discussing why she thinks that not only have the creatives, I think going back to what I said previously about George Michael and Morrissey talking in that interview, not only have the creatives sort of like waned by the wayside, right? Don't necessarily have the cool voices we had in the past, but it also might be a changing of the actual audience members and what they come to expect from their creative based upon this very monumental era during the kind of late 70s, early 80s, where a lot of our kind of really influential artists and cultural figures unfortunately passed away due to AIDS, especially when it kind of ravaged half of New York. So she comments a bit of it, and now so I play for you the clip.
Everyone talks about the effect that AIDS had on the culture, in the sense, I mean, people don't talk about it anymore, but when people did talk about it, they talked about like what artists were lost, but they never talked about this audience that was lost. When people talk about like why was New York City Ballet so great? Well, I mean, it was because of Balanchine and Jerry Robbins and people like that, but also that audience was so, I can't even think of the word. I mean, Suzanne Farrell went like this instead of this. That was it. She might as well just kill herself. There would be like 1 billion people who knew exactly every single thing. There was such a high level of connoisseurship of everything that people like this were interested in, of everything that made the culture better. A very discerning audience, a very, an audience with a high level of connoisseurship is as important to the culture as artists. It's exactly as important. Now we don't have any kind of discerning audience. When that audience died, and that audience died in 5 minutes. Literally, people didn't die faster in a war. And it allowed, of course, like the second, third, fourth tier to rise to the front. Because, of course, the first people who died of AIDS were the people who, I don't know how to put this, got laid a lot. Okay, now imagine who didn't get AIDS. Okay, that's who was then lauded as like the great, artist. Okay, if the other people that hadn't died had been alive, if they all came back to life, and I would say to them, guess who's a big star? Guess who has a Sean brother? Guess who's like a famous photographer? They would like fall on the floor. Are you kidding me?
Which maybe this might explain what Fran Lebowitz is basically saying, that the how people only speak about the impact AIDS had on the artist, but they don't speak about the impact AIDS had on the audience, right? The whole era, a whole generation of very discerning audience members who were able to really critique their favorite artists to a high level, which obviously pushed the artists to basically push their creative output to a high level too, died at the same era, because they were all intermingling with each other during those times. There was no real separation between the community and the customers and the artists. They all sort of mingled on the same dance floor, went to the same places, blah 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 blah. I think that might have been just the era when the Velvet Rope was actually created, so there wasn't that much of a separation in terms of that regard. But it kind of makes me think that might be the reason why people are quite have such a negative reaction when critics do critique their favorite artists, because they're not necessarily used to hearing somebody who's a fan of the music that person's creating or the genre roughly, and that has a level of expectation when it comes to, or basically compares their favorite artist to the people within their kind of peer group. So they sort of like take that negatively. You see that a lot with fans of like Kendrick, J. Cole. Whenever someone says a recent album maybe wasn't up to scratch, people kind of have a very visceral and angry reaction, because I guess for the most part, those guys have had a free lane to just kind of do what they're doing for the best part of 10 plus years, and they've not been really contested in their little lanes, because I guess Drake, Kendrick, and J. Cole, although they have very although they probably have a lot of similarities in their fan bases, they're very different in terms of their creative output. So they've probably got a very different type of fans, right? That they can, so they don't necessarily need to push each other in that regard, because they don't really overlap in any meaningful way, apart from the fact that they make the similar sounding music. But for the most part, stylistically, they're all very, very different. But in that era, I think what would have happened is that collectively everyone would have been kind of pushing those artists to do better, do more, and not allowing them to sort of rest on their laurels. But without that, what you then have is like, as everyone knows in music, I guess for the most part, I guess maybe with the exception of, I might say maybe indie, I think most genres have the top tier, and then the tier underneath that is like a really big drop off in terms of the level of talent and artistry. And maybe that has to do with that massive cultural genocide that happened with AIDS, and how that decimated an entire community of artists, and maybe just freaked people out in terms of changing careers, and various generations that came after the fact were kind of pushed to do other things. Who knows? But it's definitely a lack of that happening nowadays in the culture. There's a lack of kind of I wouldn't say constructive criticism, but whatever that term is, there's something that's lacking in terms of calling people out on this shit, and obviously pushing your artists to do their best work possible in order for you to be a bigger fan. But anyway, I thought that was really interesting in that regard. Fran Lebowitz talking there. Let's move on quickly. Oh, this was quite funny. So Business Teshno, as you guys are familiar, is one of my favorite social media platforms to follow, especially during the whole plague rave era in the beginning of the lockdown. It was funny to see them kind of post up clips of hypocritical DJs telling everyone to stay indoors, and then posted a clip of them playing at a flipping 300 capacity rave somewhere in the middle of a desert, whatever, right? It was just funny to see people getting called out for their hypocrisy, because hypocrites are funny to point and laugh at. And then over time it sort of changed its sort of modus operandi, changed its sort of MO, and sort of kind of purported to be a platform to spread awareness about marginalized groups and minorities within dance music culture. And now I think their bio reads something along the lines of standing up for minorities in the techno and house community or scene, I guess, right? Which is an admirable cause. I think there is something to be said for representation in dance music. Me being a DJ myself, I can say with my chest that I would sort of kind of rate my ability to mix and to play music at the same level of as a lot of people out there, but due to factors outside, now jackass, I'm not just going to blame my race for not being able to DJ. But I think there is a certain group of people who probably do see themselves being held back from basically becoming a star in the techno and house scenes, mostly due to the color of their skin, where they're from, the lack of connections, whatever it may be. There's definitely a lack of representation. Just if you just take a scan of any dance floor in any kind of major market in Europe, and you see the people that go to shows and you see people that kind of get booked to play these shows, there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of sometimes the age groups, the genders. It's just a bit weird, isn't it? There's a little bit of a repeat syndrome. There's a little bit of a a little bit of a risk avoidance in terms of lineups, right? Most bookers, most event organizers are only going to book people who they can guarantee are going to sell tickets. They're going to cause a buzz online. They can eventually get people into the place with long queues around the block, whatever it may be. So most of the time, those are the people who get booked, and they all tend to kind of occupy the same, racial composition. I don't know, whatever you may call it loosely, right? All the whiteys get all the gigs. Anyone else non-white, you have to fight for the scraps. Cool. That's one way to look at it, but of course it's more complex than that. There's a lot of things that come into play in terms of becoming a top tier touring DJ, right? It's not something everyone can do. It's a privileged position. It's not a right for everybody to become a high selling touring DJ out there. It's just something that if you are blessed enough to get an opportunity, fair enough to do it, but it's not like no one deserves something over the other person. Anyway, that aside, they've obviously modeled themselves after championing of black rights and all that stuff, especially in the wake of the tragedy with George Floyd in the US. It took like a different tone. So when this tweet came out, it sort of felt a bit weird, didn't it? Because a lot of people that were kind of rallying around Business Teshno are people that I would assume would be quite would kind of share the same similarities, right? Whether it's skin tone, whether it's where they're from originally, whether it's from what they're trying to fight in terms of structurally, in terms of the electronic music space, you think they're the same people. But again, unfortunately, because of lack of opportunity, and because everyone's just hungry and everyone's been starving for best part of a year, it's going to go into 2 years if what I said previously in the podcast is true. Everyone's going to start infighting. It is what it is. There's going to be, people are going to put down their Black Lives Matter flag, and they're just going to start pointing at people who are able to kind of continue thriving underneath these tragic circumstances whilst they're suffering. And this was probably a better example of it. So Business Teshno tweeted this tweet here from a DJ called Beercat, who, from what I've seen, observed from the outside looking in, has been somebody who's been kind of rallying and kind of ragging on the fact that the industry isn't as inclusive as it can be, and kind of really calling out a lot of people in the scene in general. So it's no surprise that she decided to kind of turn her gaze towards another DJ who played at the Boiler Room, who I remember because of her outfit. It's the only thing I remember, but I remember it being something that was kind of resonates really well with people. People seem to like it, but I remember the outfit. But she says the following in a tweet. She quote tweets it somebody else posted it saying, oh, this mix is just so hype, obviously praising the mix, a little clip from it, and she quote tweeted that and said, at first I thought she made this blend, but then I look at her mixer and see one track playing. DJs love to play a flip and act like they did something, right? So this is Big Cat, obviously looks like she's taking, you know, the piss and pointing the finger at a fellow black DJ who's also trying to get by and make the best of a bad situation. Next tweet says, she continues, Big Cat, and says, also, I don't know about turning the song down to bring the other track in, like ... obviously, you know, commenting on her lack of ability to DJ. And says the following, honestly, I'm not mad at her. I'm mad at the Boiler Room for putting people on when they clearly, all hashtags, all caps, are not ready. You see the dangers of identity politics having us out here looking nuts. So she's suggesting that if you're just getting booked because of identity politics, you're just getting booked mostly based on your color of your skin, you are damaging, right, the possibility of DJs as herself who are more skilled than you getting other gigs. But the irony came into place the second tweet, because Business Teshno posted a clip of this very same Beer Cat woman DJing somewhere, and it's sounding like a bunch of pots and pans being smashed together on a drunken night, as you were kind of coming in from the night out, you know, putting together a little 2 a.m. meal. Here's the sound of it. Now, again, that could be a bad day, right? We've all had bad mixes, you know, God forbid, I've probably had a couple along my illustrious career, DJing in bars and pubs around East London. Yeah, the king. But there's no way you can call somebody out for their questionable mixing when you're doing this on one of the biggest platforms that exist, right, out there for, you know, live DJs to stream on, because, you know, there's no denying, as much as people want to have bad things to say about Boiler Room, they have provided a platform for a lot of people, change their lives completely from one moment to the next. I remember Jada G saying once in an interview how important, and, you know, she had a bit of a hate-love relationship with Boiler Room, because I think, you know, being an attractive, you know, mixed race girl and DJing on Boiler Room, I'm sure the comments can be a little bit questionable in terms of how they sort of like talk about her and her physical appearance. But she even admitted in one of her interviews that, hey, Boiler Room literally turned my career around, right? I was considering not doing this anymore. I was considering making a change, doing something else, and it actually provided me the opportunity to be because I think even she said, semi-entitled but also quite true, that she's a lot more picky about her gigs now, based on the fact that she was on Boiler Room and it kind of boosted her profile, allowed her to play more places. She can choose and select where she wants to play. Before, she was just like any other DJ, right, myself included, where if anyone pays you money, you just go and play somewhere, right? Doesn't matter who pays you, you go and play. You're just a dancing monkey. But now she's at a stage where she can pick and choose her gigs more, because she has more of an option of where she goes, and that's primarily based on Boiler Room preferring over the platform. So when I hear people kind of disparaging Boiler Room, I get it. You know, the founders are questionable as fuck. The business practices are questionable. I recently learned that they don't pay people. They had to fire a bunch of people, even though they took loads of government grants. Like, they're a bit of a dubious, you know, questionable outfit. But in terms of net positives for the scene overall, and for especially, I guess, say lower mid-level, I say to lower to the mid-level DJs, they've definitely allowed those guys to, if not prolong their career, basically change their trajectory of their career overnight. For sure, I'm sure there's been loads of accounts of people who said, hey, I played on Boiler Room, I did this set that no one actually danced to in real life, but when I actually played it on Boiler Room, it allowed me to get this and that agency, this and that representation, blah 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 blah. So I thought that was just flipping hilarious, man, to see that hypocrisy pointed out. And then of course the girl in question, who was actually getting dissed in the first place, tweeted again and continued and said the following when she saw the kind of positive reaction about her. Said, good morning everyone, the devil works hard but Twitter works harder, have a great and positive day. So that was basically a good way to sort of like oh, she's not even black, she's actually Asian, it looks like, right? Is it Singh, is that her name? Joy T Singh. So yeah, big up her, big up Beer Cat, big up Business Teshno. There's just a bit of banter in it, no need to get upset about it, but I thought that was funny. Okay, what else is next on here to continue? Oof, I think I mentioned it previously. I think most people are probably aware of it, because I'm assuming most people are aware. It's impossible that most people don't know, but I think because someone else mentioned that they started watching, what was it that I mentioned on the podcast, the TV show that I was watching? Industry, right? So I just finished watching Industry. Industry was flipping great, right? Great first season. Can't wait to watch the next one. I don't know why all of a sudden BBC decided just to kind of release all the episodes before the end of the year. So I ended up kind of binge watching the rest of the episodes, and they were really good. Again, I much prefer it if I had the option to kind of watch it week on week. I think that really helps with the viewing experience. But again, I'm not complaining. The second show that I've been really impressed by this year has been The Mandalorian. By Jon Favreau, and he gets in a host of other, Chapter Pacific producers to come in, directors, sorry, to come in and direct the actual show itself. But I'm not the biggest Star Wars I'll say fan. Yeah, fan of focus. I'm a fan of Star Wars, but I haven't followed it over the years, right? But what I do know about Star Wars is that in the recent times, there's been a lot of kind of YouTube channels, think of Nerderotic and a few other places, who constantly rail and rag on the fact that Lucasfilm and Star Wars of nowadays isn't what they remember of the past, right? And it's completely destroyed something that they've sort of held in really high esteem. And they keep pointing out the errors of their ways, the identity politics that have come into place, the other political changes that have come and affected the movie in general, that franchise in general, and have kind of negatively affected the quality of the movies that come out ultimately in the cinemas. And a lot of it has been kind of, you've heard comments from John Boyega saying stuff about how he's been treated on there, other producers, other directors, and other castmates of previous shows that came before some of the current iteration of Star Wars, and never really got it. Then I started watching The Mandalorian. I see how good it is compared to the recent Star Wars. I watched it might have been the one with John Boyega, and you're just like, it's complete night and day how good The Mandalorian is compared to anything else I've seen from Lucasfilm or I've seen from the Star Wars universe in the last 5 to 10 years since Kathleen Kennedy's been president. And it really leads me to believe, I said it previously, that I think Jon Favreau should be the president of Lucasfilm. He has completely restored everyone's faith in the ability for somebody who actually gives a crap about the franchise and cares about the fan base and listens to the constructive criticism that comes their way, to kind of turn it around and sort of kind of pull Star Wars back up from the embers of destruction and allow it to be the culturally significant piece of art that it probably was in the past. And I remember once, because I always knew there was something off about that whole thing with the Kathleen Kennedy regime, because I remember one of the producers, one of the directors of a previous Star Wars movie said something on the lines of like, oh, there wasn't enough source material to go off from, right, regarding Star Wars. And I was like, hold on, I swear there is. I swear there's like volumes and volumes of books and comics, right, regarding Star Wars lore from various different illustrators and whatever it may be, talking about everything concerning the Star Wars universe. So it really didn't make any sense to me why they somehow made me believe that because the source material wasn't there, they were having to reinvent different narratives and objectives and character arcs in order to kind of explain away the shitty artwork that they were basically presenting to the public. And the response to The Mandalorian, largely, it feels like from the Star Wars fan base, has been pretty good. And this recent episode now that just aired, I think episode 6 or something like that, it might have been, it says, someone tweeted here the following. I don't want to play it. I think I'll probably get pulled if I play this, right? I'm pretty sure. But it said the following: Jon Favreau and Filoni in just 30 minutes made me believe Boba Fett is a badass we've been told that he was in the past 40 years than he ever was in 4 full movies. Hashtag The Mandalorian. This is really, really great scene where Boba Fett essentially destroys a whole bunch of stormtroopers in a really aggressive and kind of semi-dark way, and it's filmed in the light as well, so the ability to kind of portray terror and menace in an image that's captured sometime in the daytime was just incredible. It's just a really well put together show, man. It really, really is. I really recommend you check it out. The Mandalorian. It's available now on Disney Plus and other streaming platforms, I'm assuming, if you're not based where there's no Disney Plus. But definitely check it out, man. It's one of the best things I've watched recently, and I can't wait to watch it every week it comes on. Definitely something I kind of keep an eye on anyway when it comes to those kind of things. Next, what else we have here? Oh, this was a bad one, isn't it? So it looks like Lil Baby's got himself into a little bit of an issue. That's a bad one, isn't it? I'm sorry, I apologize. But yeah, the timeline's been exploding with this, isn't it? And I've kind of been thinking about it myself, just in terms of, just in a quasi philosophical way, right? So Lil Baby's been essentially called out because it's been alleged, or it's not been alleged so much, it's been confirmed, it looks like, but based on the screenshots, that he paid the services of a sex worker, to entertain him for the night on his birthday. And this is, of course, coming off the back of a whirlwind media narrative where him and Jada, his long term, I guess, whatever girlfriend that he is now at the moment, have been essentially painting this story online that they're couple goals and all this malarkey, and obviously Lil Baby can do no wrong, and as of most people, he's had one of the biggest glow ups in hip hop, in the recent years. Maybe he's only, competition has probably been DaBaby in terms of being able to take his career to where he is now at the moment. And he seems to be, just cultivating a really great image for himself in just how he conducts his business and conducts himself online in general. So it did kind of feel like, from the most people reading in between the lines in the comments and stuff, that this came out of the blue, right? Because they always thought, Lil Baby and Jada were kind of, doing their thing online and being couple goals and all that malarkey. But I've always long believed, and maybe this is just me, but I've long believed, maybe because I've been a scumbag and a dirtbag in my life in the past, that anybody that's like really out there and open and always posting and tagging their girlfriend or boyfriend or partner in their pictures on social media, I'm always skeptical about the strength of their relationship, about their commitment to each other, when you're constantly trying to show everybody how much in love you are by the amount of pictures that you take together, the places that you go, your matching outfits. It always kind of rubs me up the wrong way. Now, that could be my own insecurities of not wanting to show who I'm with on social media, or whatever it may be, I don't know. But for the most part, I've been led to believe, I'm led to believe that if you're overly showing your partner, you've definitely got some skeletons in your closet that you're trying to kind of divert everyone's attention away from it. Because what better way to really hide your misadventures on the interwebs by having this image out there that you're some family guy, committed relationship, holding down your woman, quote unquote, and then whenever the cameras are off of you, because then no one's going to be looking out for your indiscretions, you can just continue creeping around and doing your thing. And I think reading between the lines, someone said, or reading the comments, someone said before that I think the Lil Baby got caught liking a tweet or something, right, of this, sex worker called Miss London, and that initially rang some alarm bells for some girls, right, online. They'll have a conversation about, oh, if your boyfriend like this, would you ever take him back? Isn't liking a tweet actually cheating? So if that was the case, then I don't know, man. First of all, I don't think there's anybody I would legitimately want to pay money to have sexual relations with. I really don't. Like, even a celebrity and someone, and again, maybe it's because it's just me as a person. Maybe I'm not as sex obsessed as some people. And I think if you're maybe addicted to porn and, I don't know, adult porn stars and stuff, the kind of guys that know their names of all the adult porn stars, it's probably a different world. But I've been really trying to think about it clearly and trying to be as honest as I can to myself. If I had all the money in the world, if I was like Lil Baby and I was getting paid 400,000 per show, I was getting paid, I don't know, 100 racks for a flipping feature, I was streaming like crazy, right? Would I really want to try and hook up with a porn star just so I know I said I could and pay for it? Probably not. Maybe again, if it happened, if I was in a award show somewhere, or I was out in a club and a porn star went to get into my flipping booth, and suddenly we end up in a incandescent place somewhere and something goes down, cool. But I don't think I'd be like, because this looks like he was planning to do this, right? This looks like, okay, I've achieved my fame, I got my money, now I can finally hook up with that porn star that I've been watching for years, right? And this is what you do, innit, when you got the money. Again, if you're single, who gives a shit? But if you're in a relationship, it's a bit of an issue, right? I'm assuming. Even if you're a woman, especially if you're a woman, like, part of me would think you could maybe try and argue against it, because you could say, hey, it's not really cheating because it's a sex worker, you're paying for her services, and you're not in a relationship, you're just paying for that one thing. But I don't know, man. There has to be grounds for a breakup, no? Unless, of course, they've got an understanding that he's a big star. Imagine if that's an understanding that they have, where he's allowed to cheat on her as long as it's not a real girl, as long as it's not a girl that's just like a normal girl that he might break up and leave. You know what I mean? Because it's a porn star, it's unlikely you're going to leave. So I say that, but I'm sure there are some that have probably done it. There we go. We are back. Okay, I'm going to have to edit that bit there, but hey, what can you do? So, as I was saying earlier, maybe there's I honestly do think the woman in general has to take some responsibility with this, right? The lady in question, the porn star, Miss London. Surely, if you're a sex worker, part of it, there should be like an unwritten rule, contract that you don't speak on your clients, right? Unless, you know, it's a life or death situation or something, right? Maybe your client was a flipping serial killer, people are looking for some shit. But for the most part, you should really take your bodies to the grave. I would imagine so in that line of work. Like, you know, I'm imagining people that work within the nightlife industries in general. You've seen some pretty crazy shit, but you don't go and tell loads of people about this stuff. Maybe your close friends, but you keep, you know, you keep it, your cards close to your chest. And I would imagine that would definitely affect your ability to maybe secure a bag from another person, you know, in the future, because of your willingness to maybe open your mouth and say, you know, what happened with XYZ person. It's definitely going to affect your ability to hook up with other people in the future. I don't know, man. Sucky situation for everybody involved. I guess for the most part, being, again, I just don't, I wish I could have that mindset to kind of understand what goes through a boy's head that they want to pay for sex in the first place. But then of course, if you do want to pay for it, like, why would you pay for it when you're in a relationship, especially at this level of fame? If this Lil Baby maybe 3 or 4 years ago, fair enough, you could probably get away with it. But now you're just too famous, like you're just too well known. There is a lot of clout associated with mentioning your name, because I'm sure that, you know, porn stars, you know, account has probably gained a bunch of followers. I'm sure her business is probably booming, so it's definitely helped her in that regard. Yes, it's not the right thing to do morally, but you can't really get into a moral argument when you start, you know, paying the services of a sex worker to pleasure you during your birthday, whilst your girlfriend's probably at the party organizing your birthday party. Yeah, in the time. Like, imagine he probably popped out to say he's gonna, I don't know what, get a haircut or something, and there he is busting down some porn star. Jesus Christ, man, absolute madness. But hey, what can you do? What can you do? What else is next on this issue of the topic to talk about? We got that, we got this, we got that. What else we got here? Actually, yeah, let's speak a little bit. Should we speak a little bit? I don't know. Let's speak a little bit about this, because even though I think he loves to block videos and channels and stuff when you open up these clips on here, but Bert Kreischer sat down recently with DJ or Vlad TV, right, to talk about Chris D'Elia, and it was pretty interesting, right? Let me see if I can find it. Bert said something about Chris D'Elia, and I don't know. Let me see if I can find it on here. Should I can find it? Let me see if I can get it. Bear with me 1 second. Where is it? Isn't it here? Oh, it's hard to get a hold of, isn't it? Anyway, let's move on. Let's move on that one. I don't really know. I don't know if I can get it on here straight away. But there's a little clip where he basically spoke about him in a pretty unflattering way, as you can assume, judging by the tone of my voice and, you know, the fact that, you know, none of Chris D'Elia's friends have really come out and backed him in any meaningful way. Or let me see if I can get it anyway. The new links on here. Let's move this a bit. Bear with me. Where is it? Okay, here we go. So, hopefully, can I just play this without it taking me off copyright? If I just play the audio and not have the video playing, would that work? I don't think it will, innit? Because last time the video got blocked completely when I played it. Let's see if this works. I wonder why Vlad does that as well. He has interviews online on YouTube. Why do you have to kind of like block the video so it doesn't get played anywhere? That's annoying. Because I think I did it last time when I played a video of like Vlad interviewing who was interviewing? He might have interviewed, I forgot who it was actually. Who was it? It was a rapper. I think it might have been Fabio Forum when he was talking about his age and stuttering. And I tried to play that clip, but he just completely blocked it worldwide. So I'm hoping this doesn't happen again. But let's just play a little bit of it here now. But talking to Vlad about the issue of Chris D'Elia getting cancelled. Let me see if I can. I'll just play the audio, see if that works, and then if it doesn't, I'll change tact. Don't you worry about that.
And so forth. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's recovered from that yet, or
I don't know. I haven't talked to him. I haven't. You know, once again, it comes from a weird place of like, I know this is because I'm married to my wife, and my wife is someone who will spin things so that I can understand them. Mm-hmm. Is I don't know any of the details, what happened and what didn't happen. I know that it came out on Twitter, and there seemed to be a lot of damning evidence, but nothing wasn't in the court of law, and I don't know what the truth is. All I know is my wife was like, "Here's the only thing you got to know is how would you feel if a 37-year-old man was texting your daughter?" And that's immediately I was just like, "All right, that's pretty fucked up." Like I don't text children at all. like that doesn't ever come into my I don't even text. I don't hit up people.
So that's what Bert had to say. Hopefully you didn't. My thing didn't get cancelled, and you didn't block what you heard. But again, it's hard to get it's hard to get frustrated at people who consistently showing you their, crappy individuals and crappy friends. But I think if I was Chris D'Elia, I'd be a little bit annoyed, right? That none of my friends have come out and backed me, especially when you consider the severity of the allegations in comparison to other people who have got way more support. Just reading the cold-hearted truth and facts of the matter, it does appear like Chris was a bit of a dog, right? He definitely had a partner at home who was pregnant at the time, if not giving birth. And he was making sure that he was hitting up any girl on his socials that were commenting, leaving double taps on any person, any kind of female that interacted with his social media in any kind of meaningful way. It looks like he tried to make an effort to talk to them personally, right? And then of course made sure to kind of delete his paper trail by converting them over to Snapchat, all this sort of be kind of dirty dog sort of stuff, especially if you've got a partner. I guess if you're single, it wouldn't really matter. You'd be looked at as a creep. But if you've got a partner at home, doing what he was doing is obviously not good, not correct. But for the most part, it doesn't look like he was actively trying to hook up with underage girls. He might have a preference for younger girls, like most men do. Most men do like younger women, right? That's the kind of the general consensus. That's not a crime. But he did slip up on a couple of occasions where he might have messaged people who are underage. And then the one that I think really hurt him was the one where he clearly was told that the girl was underage. He backed away. And then as soon as he knew she turned of age and, was whether it's 18 or whatever it was, he slid back in the DMs. That was a bit weird. Okay, cool. But there's no crime there being committed. If anything, he is obeying the law, which is kind of, making sure that you only hook up with people of age. Now, then when you read the accounts of the girls actually involved, it sounds like he was absolutely a dick to these girls when they actually did meet them in person. And again, it's not excusing the fact that you're going to hook up with young girls outside of marriage or outside of your relationship with a baby on the way. Regardless, that's still scumbaggery. But in person, it sounded like he was a bit of a shit company, right? He didn't go out of his way to make the girls feel comfortable. If anything, he tried to, it seemed like maybe initiate trains with some of these other openers when they were doing shows and stuff. So really dog creepy stuff, but nothing that I would say, hey, he's categorically a bad person. He might be a bit of a shitbag to girls, but in general, from what I've seen so far, he's not. And why I would say that is because throughout his success and throughout his kind of time where he was jumping on podcasts after podcasts and, giving these guys views and stuff, no one really called him out on the stuff he was saying. I didn't hear any whispers prior to that, bomb of a revelation from that girl who's watching you one day, which is, he's probably cursing the day he was ever on that show, because that's what essentially started this whole flurry of accusations coming out. But I didn't hear anything from the comedy community prior. I might have heard some whispers on podcasts here and there about how many girls come out to go watch Chris D'Elia do stand-up and stuff, but it was pretty understandable considering he's the only guy who's kind of normally averagely handsome looking in the sort of LA stand-up community. He was really pretty popular on Vine, which is populated by a lot of young people, and he tends to have a style of comedy that might lend itself to younger crowds. So it wasn't no surprise to me that he had a bit of a female fan base out there, but I never really heard anything untoward about him. We didn't really hear that he was a bad guy behind the scenes. If anything, everyone loved him. And then suddenly the accusations come out and no one has the decency to call him. That's the first thing that really come to mind here. Vlad asks Bert Kreischer about Chris D'Elia, and he says, I don't know, I haven't spoken to him. How can you not speak to a friend in the community someone that was a friend, someone who, if you read between the lines, he was meant to be in Bert Kreischer's The Cabin. That's what I think, because he always says, "Oh, we have to change things," and he always stumbles his words. But you know, Bert Kreischer, he's a glutton for dropping a name here and there. But it feels like to me they filmed an episode of The Cabin with Crystalia, but they had to delete it or change it or fill him in with somebody else. It might have been Crystalia and Bobby Lee, and they had to swap it with somebody else. Lastminute.com, like a Donald Runs, whatever it may be. So for someone like him, who it seems like they were some way cordial, they somehow had some sort of relationship, whether it was just professional, whatever it was, to not have given him the decency of a phone call so he could explain his side of things. He didn't do it. Bert Kreischer, Brendan Schaub and Brian Callen didn't call Crystalia prior and ask for his side of the story. They just turned on the camera to start blubbering, and Brendan Schaub did the kind of iconic "I can't talk" bullshit. So none of his friends, maybe with the exception of Joe Rogan, who's never going to say anything anyway. It feels like Joe Rogan's got like a bit of a code of conduct he does whenever his friends are involved in public scandals. He never comments on it, right? That's basically his luxury for having fuck you money. He could just afford not to talk about it and not bring it up. And then when you're over it, he'll bring it back on his show. It feels like for the most part, you've seen that he's done that with Alex Jones, maybe except for Minor, maybe someone else. I don't know if he likes you, he'd kind of always going to give you a second chance. But everyone else in the community, for the most part, in the LA comedy scene, has completely abandoned him. When you think about it, his allegations are being a bit of a creep and a douche and sliding into the DMs unknowingly of somebody else underage and then getting back into the DMs when she was of age. That's at most what he's effectively done, and everyone has essentially excommunicated him from the scene. Now, that could be just because he's less competition for everybody, right? It could just be a pure selfishness thing. Like, hey, he was crushing the Comedy Store. Every time you heard people talking about the Comedy Store, they would always really talk in glowing terms about how well Crystalia did on stage, right? How he absolutely destroyed. So it made sense. It could make some level of sense why they would be quick to kind of bury him and distance themselves from Crystalia so that they could afford the opportunity to maybe get a spot on the lineup. But again, how proud would you be that you kind of got your spot on the comedy lineup just because you failed to stand up for somebody? You stand up for a friend who was going through a tough situation. And again, no one's saying you condone his behavior. No one's saying that. But so far, apart from Theo Vaughn and maybe to some extent Tom Segura and Christina Pazynski, when they spoke about it, to some extent, no one's really come out and just said, hey, what he's done allegedly, I think is horrible, but he's my friend and I'm going to be there for him as in any way possible that I can, because that's what friends do. No one's even said that. Just that. No one said that. Everyone essentially has tried to make it seem as if what he's done is cancelable and just refuse to speak about it or speak positive about it in any way, shape or form. Look at Whitney Cummings, who's meant to be his best friend in Hollywood, deleting his episode on a podcast, distancing himself completely from him, burying him in any chance that she gets available, going through this midlife crisis she's going through at the moment, where she's kind of painting her hair like a mermaid. Like, come on, man. These guys are horrible. And again, maybe it's a good thing. I think if you're Crystalia, maybe it's a good thing that you get to see everybody as they are in the light. No one can kind of hide behind a tweet or something. Everyone can speak at the time, in real time. It's all recorded, it's all documented, so you get to see how people actually are, especially if you're at his level of success and credibility, blah blah. Like, for to have people not go out their way, because that's what, I don't know, maybe it's a symptom of Hollywood. It just is what it is, isn't it? Like, it's dog eat dog, innit? Because if somebody as famous as him could get completely ditched, everyone should be on notice, right? As I say in History Hyenas, you're on notice. Everyone should be on notice. Everyone should be on notice that, hey, if I get in any kind of scandal, I'm on my own. I think most of the LA guys, it feels like the New York comedians, because they're, effectively ignored by the majority of with the exception of some of the Legion of Skanks guys, but mostly they're kind of ignored and tolerated. But I guess for the LA comedians out there, you have to be under the assumption that if you do get cancelled, you are on your own. You have nobody. No one's going to help you. No one's going to come to your aid. So that probably is the reason why a lot of these guys are like, you know what? I'm not getting involved, mate. I'm not getting involved, because if I do get involved and I get somehow attached to this story in an inadvertent way, there's too much on the line. If you're Bert Kreischer, like, you have kids who are maybe not teenagers. Yeah, teenagers now at the moment, I think so, right? Going to college soon. You have a new house you're paying for. maybe housing adjustments, you're building a man cave, I don't know, whatever you're doing with your money, you have a lot of bills. You can't afford to risk your career for a guy who essentially got himself in trouble, really, innit? Because for everything I'm saying about his friends being shitty, Chris D'Elia only has himself to blame. If he would have played home a bit better and not try to kind of smash as much, poon as he wanted to on the road, he would have been fine. But maybe his addiction to, indulging himself in the trappings of tour life maybe kind of got the best of him. And it also, I think, served the best. I think it probably helped the comedy scene, or it helped a lot of the wives and mothers at home of the LA comedians a lot in the long run, in the bigger picture. I think there's a lot more. There were probably other comedians out there who probably did as much, or if not worse, than Chris D'Elia on the road, who probably got put off by the negative reaction that he got from getting caught out in people's DMs, and they probably kind of hung up their player sort of hat, or shoes that they put on when they go out and creep on the night after their shows on tour. So it might have actually helped the scene in general in terms of kind of keeping households together, rescuing marriages and families and all that sort of stuff. So maybe he's a sacrificial lamb, and it's kind of the best thing that happened. But again, it would be good to see him make a comeback. I think, especially if you kind of compare the level of severity of allegations compared to, you shouldn't do this, but imagine Chris D'Elia and Brian Callen. One person's been accused of raping somebody. Do you know what I mean? Like that's an insane accusation to come out with. So, and if a guy is just being a little bit too horny in the DMs, that's one thing, but raping somebody is a whole nother thing. So, if anyone deserves a second chance, it's definitely Chris D'Elia. But hey, whether or not that happens, especially in this sort of society we're living at the moment, I'm not too sure, man. I'm not too sure. Anyway, moving on deep. What else do we have here? That Beasley thing was ages ago, and let's do this one here. Okay, so this is an interesting story. So let's do this one. Chance the Rapper's former manager sues him and brutally roasts a Big Day. So this is from Vulture. This is the following. Chance the Rapper is facing a lawsuit by his former manager over the release of his last album, The Big Day. Pat Cochran, who was instrumental in Chance's ability to find a breakout success as an independent rapper starting 2012, filed a suit in Illinois this week alleging that Chance, real name Chancellor Bennett, broke an oral agreement between the two and owes over $3 million in missed commissions, according to the Courthouse News. Chance fired Cochran in April, replacing him with his father Ken Bennett and rapper brother Taylor Bennett. Cochran now claims that the breach of contract and a violation of the Illinois State Sales Representative Act, among other counts, stemming from Chance's refusal to continue their alleged year-long agreement to pay Cochran 15% of profits, including for an industry standard 3 years after his firing. Cochran further claims Chance's father has only offered him to lump sum of $350,000. The interactions related to the payments have been contentious. Representatives for Chance Rapper have not responded to Vulture's request for comment. In the lawsuit, Cochran traces problems of his relationship with Chance to February 2012, when the rapper announced that his debut studio album, The Big Day, would come out in July, without consulting Cochran. He said it was likely there was not enough time for the creative process involved in releasing the album, the suit claims, citing Chance's March wedding. Cochran implies Chance's announced the album before the recording of the writing process even began, madness, and goes on to knock the unproductive and undisciplined studio sessions that followed. Procrastination and lackadaisical effort, perpetuated by various hangers-on and uninterested in the hard work of writing and recording, resulted in a freestyle-driven product subpar quality. The suit goes on to claim, calling the album a complete deviation from the meticulous writing process that brought Bennett fame for his wordplay and wit. Cochran cites the album's tepid critical reception and the quick fade from the charts as a hurt in both Chance's and his own reputations, along with not creating enough hype for a subsequently planned arena tour. After Cochran recommended Chance cancel the tour, the rapper instead first postponed it, then ultimately never rescheduled it. Bennett ultimately blamed Cochran for the judgment rendered by his fan base rather than accept his own lack of dedication that doomed the project to filing claims, which is mad, isn't it? And this sort of filing or this sort of claim or this suit, regardless if it's true or not, it does give you a little bit of an insight into why somebody like a Chance the Rapper is so infatuated with Kanye West. You get it a lot when he appears on sometimes a Joe Budden podcast and he kind of gets a call and they sort of ask him to chime in on Kanye, and he just never ever has a bad thing to say about him. He's always bending over backwards to make excuses for Kanye's actions, even the most deplorable ones. And it does make you believe, especially at the time, I thought, hold on, Chance is an actual decent, it seems like, appearing guy in public. So why would he be so forgiving of Kanye's inability to just be a nice guy sometimes, right? And it goes to show the reason why is because Chance behind closed doors is the same person as Kanye. They are the same person. That's why Chance kind of relates to him to some level. Because for him to decide to go against his manager's advice concerning the big day, especially when, you know, it's not playing armchair quarterback now, but even at the time when the album actually came out, I'm glad that we know now that we weren't going crazy when we heard it. You know, fans of Chance as I am myself, right? I'm a big fan of acid rap and what he's done in between stages. Of course, he's a massive corny cheese dog, but I like him for that. I love that he's kind of the only rapper doing what he does in that sort of style, you know, having a Christian background, being family orientated. I love that about him, actually. But the big day just wasn't what it kind of set out to be. It didn't have the artistic depth and range of any of his previous work, and it just wasn't interesting to listen to, and it quite quickly, you know, fell out of favor with a lot of the Chance Rapper's fan base. And that tour that he announced was very embarrassing too. The lack of ticket sales that kind of got leaked out, then he ultimately just didn't talk about it anymore, like most big stars do when things don't go well. They just don't talk about it anymore, and we never really got that rescheduled tour again. And now we know why, right? Because the album wasn't really well received and the tickets just weren't selling. No one went to see him perform that album in full in any meaningful way. But yeah, man, like, just imagine treating somebody that kind of helped to kind of cultivate your entire image over, you know, this span of your entire career in this manner, and thinking that it would kind of go unnoticed. Like, that's the kind of shitty part about it. And again, you're hoping that they kind of reach an amicable resolution, but if there was an oral agreement that took place, which is as binding as a actual bit of paper, what you're assuming is going to happen is that he's probably going to have to settle for a lot of money regardless. It's going to be definitely going to be more than 300,000 that his dad offered. He's definitely going to have to pay a substantial amount just to keep this story out of the headlines, because if anything of what we know about Kanye and what we know about Chance, they like to control the narrative. They want people to kind of view them in a certain light. So he's definitely going to take a cue out of Kanye West's book and just make sure that he kind of, you know, buries his story under litigation, under NDAs, pays the manager off and just keeps it moving. But Jesus, right? I was surprised by this, man. Like, this is definitely a revelation. This is like being told someone like The Rock is a shitty human being, right? You wouldn't believe it, right? Because you just believe what you see on TV, on YouTube, on movies and stuff. You would never believe he's a bad human. I guess that's a similar sort of vein happening with Chance the Rapper. But again, who knows? Maybe we are all overreacting. We do not know. What else happened here? We have that one, and let's end because again we're approaching 145 minutes. Sorry about that. So a long podcast show, and then we're going to end it with this. There's been a bit of an update on the whole Dutchavelli situation, which probably shouldn't be updating any. I don't know why the family keeps talking about this stuff. Maybe because quite clearly behind the scenes there are things happening that are probably going to affect Dutch's ability to make music, or maybe they're just worried about what the reception will be like once he does come out and face the music. But let's see where the clip is. This is from UK Gossip. So this is from UK Gossip. They posted about it earlier today, and it says the following: new DMs claiming Dutchavelli's innocence have been revealed. So this is a screenshot here taken from some girl called Angela Cartier's account. I think that might be the girl involved, right? The underage girl. So let's just tread lightly, but I think this might be it. So it says the following: when Dutch got hacked, I did too. They deleted all my messages. I saw people messaging me telling me to provide the original messages, but I couldn't, as they were all gone when I went through our chat. But I just went into my story archives and found some of the original stories Dutch was replying to. Dutch's name needs to be cleared, as all these lies being told on him are disgusting. My family and I are going through hell, all because of these lies. This whole situation is unfair and painful. Swipe for some of the original messages. Please stop with all the lies. And she says, in a caption, Dutch is like family to us. There are a lot of fake messages going around, but this is facts. Clout is killing my people. It's never good to speak on a matter you know nothing about. If it wasn't for my archives, you guys will still be accusing Dutch, and it's sickening. So they're coming at it hard, right? They're coming out swinging, trying to clear his name. And again, that might mean that behind the scenes there is a kind of worry and a suspicion that most likely the fan base won't forget this, and it will somehow negatively impact his ability to continue being the star that he was kind of on the way to being at the, prior to these allegations coming to light. So, which is kind of bad, because it looks like it's just more of a case of making sure they protect the money as opposed to clearing his name of actually being a bit of a nonce. I don't know, but anyway, let's see the evidence. So this is obviously a post that looks like Dutch was maybe replying to an image of a young girl, looks like a toddler of some sort, related to the family, and him posting heart eye emojis might have been due to that and not something else. So I guess the argument they're basically the argument they're providing is that whoever hacked Dutchavelli's account went into his DMs, saw he was messaging this underage girl, and then purposely deleted the messages to make it look like Dutch was saying something that he wasn't saying, screenshotted them, and then shared them out there. Or the other thing they're saying is that somebody that hacked into the account took the account details, screenshotted all the illicit stuff, or maybe shared login with somebody else, and then that person edited all the images in Photoshop or something and made it look a certain way. I don't know. Do you believe that? Does it matter though? I guess it does, because if we don't believe that, if we don't move on from this and accept that he's not a nonce, then he's not going to have the career that he wants to have, innit? That's probably the worry. And I guess they're more worried now that his actual fans won't believe him, because I think I think I said it previously, right? When I listened to his posts on his own page, it did seem like his own fan base were pretty on side, but that might have been because he was just deleting comments. Maybe his management put in because I think Instagram, if you've got a verified account, you can do that thing where you can have like an automatic comments get hidden automatically if they mention certain keywords. So you can maybe make sure if someone says nonce or pedo, you can eventually just highlight those words. If they say them, the comment doesn't come up at all. So maybe I just got like a very edited version of his comment replies, but because for the most part, most of the comments on his page were positives, and the ones on the blog sites were all negative or a mixed bag depending. So next screenshot here, you got an image of Meg Thee Stallion, and then I don't know, what does this prove? That the girl uploaded the picture of Meg Thee Stallion and then Dutchavelli put heart emojis? I don't know. Another image of, it looks like it might be the young girl driving. Is she no, it's somebody else. Don't know who that is driving in a car, left-hand drive with a gun in her lap, regardless. It says my babes. And then the image that everyone was trying to basically say that was really incriminating was the image of the girl uploading a picture of something Rose, I forgot. Anyway, these two American people, and the guy behind him, the guy behind the girl has obviously got his hand around the girl's waist, and they're in an intimate image, and everyone's like, oh, why would you be saying that to an underage girl? And what they're alleging is that she was actually sharing that image to Dutch and mostly focusing on the girl's hand gestures, which might have been something attributing to whatever gang Dutchavelli's was, near or whatever. I don't know. That's basically what they're trying to say. So the original message says, him, Dutch, saying to her, what are you trying to tell me? And then she says, just her hand gestures. And then on the fake image, it says, it just got, on the same picture, it hasn't got her reply. It's just got him saying, babes, don't worry, we're going to make that pic soon. I don't know. Again, I don't know, man. The story has changed so many times in this issue that it's starting to feel like it's all a bit of a lie, isn't it? Like, I don't know what the lie is or where it stops, where it ends. Because there is a possibility, right, that the story got way out of hand, and then by the time they could correct it, people were talking who shouldn't be speaking at the time. Because I felt like at the time, the mum and it felt that it was on my minute when she came out and she was basically alluded to the fact that she was the one that was talking to Dutch through her daughter's Instagram DMs. That basically didn't sound right either. Then when the sister come out, when Dutchavelli's other sister came out, not Steph, somebody else, that also didn't help things. So maybe it was a legitimate error in how they responded to it. Like, because the family were panicking, everyone was trying to go and save face for him. Then, of course, he didn't help the situation by just not talking about it again and kind of threatening people via Instagram stories. Remember, he did that video outside of the airport, if I like, or something, where he was basically, threatening people and whatever. Then, obviously, he went to Dubai and did his thing there. That obviously didn't look good for some people's eyes, because if you've got such a serious issue hanging over your head, the last thing she was thinking about is mimosas on the beach or something. And then by the time everyone kind of settled down and wanted to address it in a serious manner, there was already the incriminating stuff with Dutch's sister in Steph, who looked like she was trying to gaslight the guy that was a relative of the underage girl. It just didn't come across good, right? Now that could be because they're just inexperienced with dealing with controversy for the most part, because it feels like Steph's been pretty unproblematic, right? I don't think she's got into anything questionable online. I don't know, maybe I don't really follow that closely. And Dutch too, for the most part, apart from maybe some beef with actual rappers, he's been pretty okay in terms of how he's been dealt with online. So maybe that lack of experience and the severity of allegations just made them a bit frazzled, and they didn't know how to reply to it properly. But again, I'm shooting them way too much bail. This just seems fishy. Like, you wouldn't go to this extent and keep on trying to rewrite the narrative if you weren't worried that you might have committed the crime that you were accused of. I don't know. But then again, there's so much on the line, in it. If you're Dutch's family and stuff, you're going to try your best to make sure this gets cleared, because there's a lot at stake, really. You can't really, I don't know. Continues here. Another one says, image of her saying, I was just tanning. It's hotter today, though. I will go in today. Mum's tannings, but she's burnt already. There's food, but hurry up or I'm having it. It says, your uncle told me, and Jams to pull up. I'm coming. Laugh, laugh, laugh. What should I come? Don't mind. Up to you. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, man. I just don't know. Even if I had a cousin that was a girl and she was 14, I wouldn't be talking to her via Instagram DMs. I just wouldn't. I might call her to double check, or if we're that close, but still, it's just weird still. And why would she want to talk to me? I get it. I get it's different because he's Dutch, right? He's a celebrity, so she probably looks at him differently because of that. That's normal. I can understand that. But as the adult, should you be even communicating with her? And I just don't know if you should. I don't know, man. Like, number one, I wouldn't want my 14-year-old cousin to even see what I'm getting up to on Instagram stories anyway to begin with, right? I'd want to kind of keep that separate. And then to be communicating with them on a ha he thing on DMs is a bit dodgy, isn't it? Maybe it's just me. I don't know, man. Maybe it's just me. Maybe because I just don't have any interest in talking to teenagers either. Like, even if they are family, like, come on. It continues here. LOL, you've been had. She says, why did I know you was gonna say this? And I know I have you a lit nigga. He says, I was speaking to your mum for you, lot to come to mine. Yeah, she says, so come spend the night then. She says, yeah, we are still ill. I will when my best comes back. When my test comes back. Okay, cool. It says sweat emoji. It says, are you coming or not? It says, coming where? To my house. It says, I don't know, his uncle there. Yeah. Fox said he will put you lot in a cab. Okay, I guess. Okay, where are you? I'm at home, Dutch. Send her a postcard. I tried to call your mum. She's not answering. I don't know, man. I don't know. Who knows? This could be true. This could be the actual series of events that led to Dutch talking to his young teenage cousin via Instagram DMs, but I still think that's weird. They still haven't addressed that part of the story. I know maybe the narrative has sort of changed, and maybe because I just can't imagine a hacker would go to that length to try and make him look that bad. But again, who knows? Maybe we're kind of not kind of accounting for the trolly nature of a hacker that might want to upset the apple cart somewhat, especially if they're not fans of Dutch's artistry, or they're not, they're from the ops ends or whatever. I don't know, but it just seems weird, and it seems a little bit too convoluted. I mean, it could be the case. Who knows? I just think now we just have to let the people decide, innit? I think you can only fight your corner to some extent. You're never going to convince everybody. I think people that weren't fans of Dutch anyway are never going to be convinced that he's not a nonce. And if you are a fan of it, you're just going to have to kind of battle in your head whether or not you can separate the artist from the art. And if you can, cool, be his fan. If you cannot, you just have to move on and go to somebody else. But I guess, again, like I said in the previous video, if the family are okay with it, we have to be okay with it as well. We just have to kind of move on. We just can't keep beating a dead horse, even though I am quintessentially beating a dead horse. But hey, we're here. Anyway, that was the Agostinho Zinga Show, episode number 407. Thanks so much for tuning in as per usual. It's been a bit of a longer one, this one, so please excuse some of the rambling that occurred in the beginning. If it's your first time checking out the show, make sure you smash that like button, hit subscribe, leave a comment down below. And of course, if you're listening to the podcast app, please leave me a 5-star review and share the show with your friends. That'll be more than welcome. But again, until next time, take care, be safe, and I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Peace.